The rain hammered against the stone walls of Windsor Castle that November morning. Inside the guardhouse, James Mitchell stood at attention, his red uniform pressed to perfection. He had served the royal family for 17 years. Never once had he broken protocol, until today. The radio crackled in his ear. "Mitchell, you're on escort duty. Main entrance, 5 minutes." He nodded, though no one could see him. Escort duty was routine. Politicians, dignitaries, distant relatives, he'd walked hundreds of guests through those ancient corridors. His job was simple: guide them in, stay silent, guide them out. But when the black Mercedes pulled through the gates, something felt different. The rain had turned the courtyard into a mirror. James watched as the car door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-60s, elegant in a navy coat, pearls at her neck. She glanced up at the castle windows, and quickly looked away. Carole Middleton, the Princess of Wales's mother. James had seen her before at state events. Always composed, always smiling for cameras. But today, her hands trembled as she clutched her handbag. Her eyes were red. "Mrs. Middleton," James said, offering a slight bow. "This way, please." She nodded but didn't speak. "Before you continue watching, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this don't come around every day, and you won't want to miss what happens next." They walked toward the grand entrance, the public door used by guests and officials. But as they approached, Carole stopped. "Not that way," she said quietly. James turned. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "The sovereign's entrance." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Please." James felt his chest tighten. The sovereign's entrance was reserved exclusively for the king and queen. No exceptions. It was one of the oldest rules in the royal household. Even prime ministers used the main entrance. "I can't, please." She looked at him now, fully. Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "My daughter is inside. She asked me to come. She needs me. And I will not walk through that castle like a visitor. Not today." The rain grew louder. Water streamed down the ancient stones. Somewhere above, James knew, cameras were watching. Security was listening. Every move inside Windsor was documented, catalogued. Reviewed. If he escorted her through the sovereign's entrance, his career would be over by nightfall. But something in Carole's face stopped him from saying no. "What happened?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Is the princess? She's fine? Physically?" Carole's jaw tightened. But there are moments when a daughter needs her mother. When titles and protocols don't matter, this is one of those moments. James glanced up at the castle. In one of the high windows, a curtain moved, just slightly. Someone was watching. He thought of his own mother. How she'd sat beside his hospital bed for 3 days when he was 12, never sleeping, holding his hand. How she'd fought with doctors and nurses to stay with him. Even when they said visiting hours were over, "Some rules," she'd told him once, "are less important than love." James took a breath. He could feel his career hanging in the balance. 17 years of service. A pension. His reputation. But he could also feel something else, the weight of a mother's desperation. "Follow me," he said. They turned away from the main entrance. James's boots echoed against wet stone as they walked toward the private side of the castle. Toward the entrance used only by royalty. Toward the door he was forbidden to open for anyone but the king and queen. As they approached, James saw her again in the window. Queen Camilla, standing perfectly still, watching them with an expression he couldn't read from this distance. She didn't move. She didn't look away, and James knew whatever happened next would change everything. The sovereign's entrance stood before them. Oak doors, 12 feet tall, carved with the royal coat of arms. James had walked past this entrance 1,000 times. He'd never once opened it. His hand reached for the brass handle. It was cold, heavier than he expected. "Wait." Carole's voice made him pause. "Are you certain? I don't want you to lose everything because of me." James looked at her. Really looked at her. This wasn't a woman seeking attention or making a statement. This was a mother being called to her child. He could see it in every line of her face. "I'm certain," he said. The door opened with a low groan that echoed through the courtyard. Inside, the corridor stretched ahead, marble floors, portraits of kings and queens lining the walls. Silence hung thick in the air. They stepped inside together. James had been in this corridor only once before. Years ago, during a security briefing. It felt different now, sacred, like he was walking somewhere he didn't belong. Their footsteps echoed too loudly. Carole walked with her head high, but James could see her fingers gripping her handbag until her knuckles turned white. "How is she really?" James asked quietly. He knew he shouldn't. Guards didn't ask questions. But somehow, in this forbidden corridor, normal rules felt suspended. Carole didn't answer immediately. They passed a portrait of Queen Elizabeth, her painted eyes seeming to follow them. "Have you ever watched someone you love become someone else?" Carole finally said. "Not in a bad way, but in a way that takes them somewhere you can't follow?" James thought of his daughter, 8 years old, already outgrowing the games they used to play, already becoming her own person. "Yes," he said. "Catherine became the Princess of Wales," Carole continued, "and I'm proud. So proud I could burst. But she's also still my daughter. The girl who used to cry during thunderstorms, who called me at university when she was homesick." They turned a corner. A servant appeared ahead, carrying silver trays. He saw them, froze for a split second, then quickly looked away and disappeared through a side door. Word would spread now. Fast. 3 hours ago, Carole said. She called me. Not through staff. Not through proper channels. She found a phone and called my mobile directly. She was trying not to cry. She said, "Mom, can you come? Please? I just need you here." "What happened?" James asked. "Something at a royal function. I don't know the details. But my daughter was hurting, and I heard it in her voice. The voice she's not allowed to use in public. The one without the careful words and measured pauses." They reached a staircase. Red carpet, gold railings. James had seen photos of the king walking these stairs during the coronation coverage. "So I got in the car," Carole said. "I didn't call ahead. Didn't ask permission. I just came. And when I arrived, they told me I'd need to wait. That someone would escort me through proper channels. That there were protocols." She stopped walking and turned to James. "I've followed protocols for 14 years, she said. Since the engagement, I've smiled when told to smile, stayed quiet when told to stay quiet, worn the right clothes, said the right things. I've watched my daughter transform into someone extraordinary, and I've stood back to let her shine." Her voice cracked slightly. For today she needs her mother. Not a visitor. Not a guest. Her mother. James understood then. This wasn't about ego or status. This was about a woman who'd spent years watching her daughter disappear behind titles and duties, finally being called back to something simple and real. "Come on," he said gently. "She's waiting." They climbed the stairs together. At the top, another corridor stretched ahead, longer, quieter. Paintings of royal children stared down at them from the walls. James's. Radio crackled. "Mitchell, what's your position?" He didn't answer. "Respond." "We have eyes on the sovereign's corridor." "What's your status?" He reached down and switched the radio off. Carole looked at him, surprised. "You'll be in serious trouble, I know. Why are you doing this?" James thought about all the rules he'd memorized over 17 years. The protocols, the hierarchies, the careful distances maintained between servants and royalty, all designed to keep order, to maintain tradition. But he also thought about the human beings inside these walls. How titles couldn't protect you from pain. How crowns couldn't replace the comfort of someone who'd known you before you were famous. Because some rules, he said, are less important than love. They continued forward. The corridor seemed endless. But finally, at the far end, a door stood slightly open. Soft light spilled out. James could hear voices inside. One of them was the Princess of Wales. She sounded tired. Carole's pace quickened. She was almost running now, her careful composure breaking. James stayed back. This part wasn't for him. But as Carole reached the door, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Queen Camilla. She stood blocking the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a long moment no one spoke. The two women looked at each other. Carole, with tears finally falling. Camilla, perfectly composed in a pale blue dress. "You used the sovereign's entrance," Camilla said quietly. "Yes," Carole replied. "I did." The Queen's eyes shifted to James, still standing 10 feet away. He could feel his career ending in real time. "Your Majesty," he began. "I take full responsibility," Camilla raised one hand. Silence filled the corridor. Then slowly she stepped aside. "She's been asking for you," Camilla said to Carole. Her voice was softer now, almost kind. "Go to her." Carole didn't wait. She moved past the Queen and disappeared through the door. James stood frozen, alone now with Queen Camilla in the corridor. She studied him carefully, this guard who'd broken one of the oldest rules in the palace. "What's your name?" she asked. "James Mitchell, Your Majesty. How long have you served?" 17 years. She nodded slowly. Then she walked toward him, her heels clicking against marble. When she was close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes, she stopped. "Do you know why we have these rules, James?" she asked. "About the entrances. To maintain order, Your Majesty. To preserve tradition, yes, but also—" She paused, glancing back at the room where Carole had gone. "Also because once you start making exceptions, where do you stop?" James said nothing. There was no good answer. "But I've learned something," Camilla continued. "Being in this family, living in these walls, I've learned that sometimes the most important thing we can preserve isn't tradition." She looked at him directly. "It's humanity." James didn't know what to say. Queen Camilla had always seemed distant in the formal, careful, hard to read. But now he saw something else in her face. Understanding. "You're going to be questioned about this," she said. "Probably disciplined. There will be reports, investigations. I know, Your Majesty." Was it worth it? James thought of Carole's face when she asked for help. The desperation of a mother who just wanted to reach her child. "Yes," he said. "It was—" Queen Camilla studied him for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled, just slightly, but it was there. "I'll speak to the security chief," she said. "Tell them I authorized your escort. That won't make everyone happy, but it will keep you employed." James felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't thank me. You made the choice." She turned to leave, then paused. "But James, the next time you decide to break protocol, maybe turn your radio off a bit sooner." Then she was gone, disappearing back into the private rooms of the castle, leaving James alone in the corridor. He stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. Through the door, he could hear voices. Carole's, Catherine's, the soft sound of a mother comforting her daughter. No cameras. No protocols. Just a family. James turned and began walking back the way he'd come. His steps echoed in the empty corridor. In his pocket, his radio began buzzing again. Questions, demands for answers. But for the first time in 17 years, James Mitchell wasn't worried about following orders. He'd done something more important. He'd done what was right. James made it halfway down the corridor before he heard footsteps behind him. "Mitchell," he turned. A tall man in a dark suit approached quickly. Daniel Foster, head of palace security. His face was stone, Sir James said, standing at attention. "My office now." They walked in silence through corridors James knew by heart. Past the grand ballroom, past the state dining room, down a narrow staircase to the administrative wing, where tourists never went and cameras never reached. Foster's office was small, windowless. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets along the walls. Photos of the royal family hung in perfect rose formal, distant, untouchable. Foster closed the door. "Sit." James sat. His heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. 17 years of training didn't disappear in one morning. Foster remained standing, arms crossed. "Do you want to tell me what happened? Or should I just review the security footage?" "I escorted Mrs. Middleton through the sovereign's entrance," James said. She requested it. I agreed. You agreed. Foster's voice was dangerously quiet. You agreed to break a protocol that's been in place for 300 years. Yes, sir. Why? James met his eyes. Because she needed to reach her daughter, and I believed it was the right thing to do. Foster stared at him for a long moment. Then he sat down, leaning back in his chair. He looked tired suddenly. Older than his 52 years? Do you know how many guards we have at Windsor? Foster asked. Approximately 200, sir. 214. And do you know how many of them would have done what you did this morning? James said nothing. None, Foster continued. Not one. Because they understand that this place only functions if everyone follows the rules. No exceptions. No personal judgment calls. He pulled out a file from his desk drawer. James recognized the label, Disciplinary Procedures. You've been here 17 years, Foster said, flipping through pages. Perfect record. Not a single incident. 3. You were being considered for a promotion to senior guard next year. We're past tense, I understand, sir, do you? Foster leaned forward. Because I don't think you do. This isn't about you breaking one rule. It's about what happens when everyone thinks they can decide which rules matter and which don't. How long before this place falls apart? James wanted to defend himself, to explain about Carole's face, her desperation, the humanity of the moment, but he knew Foster didn't want to hear it. However, Foster said, and something in his tone shifted. Queen Camilla called me personally 15 minutes ago. James looked up, surprised. She told me she had authorized your escort, that you were following her direct orders. Foster's expression was unreadable. Obviously, that's not true. But she made it very clear that if any disciplinary action is taken against you, she will be displeased. I didn't ask her to, I know you didn't, which somehow makes this worse. Foster closed the file. You've put me in an impossible position, Mitchell. I can't discipline you without contradicting the Queen, but if I do nothing, every guard in this castle will think they can break protocol whenever they feel like it. Silence filled the small office. So here's what's going to happen, Foster said. You're being transferred. Effective immediately. You'll finish out the month at Windsor, then move to Balmoral. Balmoral, Scotland. 8 hours from his home in London. 8 hours from his daughter. James felt something sink in his chest. For how long? 6 months. Maybe a year. Depends on how quickly people forget about this. I have a daughter. She's 8. I can't just... You should have thought about that before you opened that door. Foster's voice was sharp now. You made a choice. Choices have consequences. James clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, to point out the unfairness, but he knew Foster was right. He'd known the cost when he turned that handle. Yes, sir, he said quietly. You're dismissed. Report to the guardhouse for reassignment. James stood, moving toward the door. His hand was on the handle when Foster spoke again. Mitchell, he turned. Foster was looking at him differently now. The hardness had softened, just slightly. Off the record, Foster said. What you did this morning, I don't agree with it. I can't agree with it. But I understand why you did it. James nodded once. Then he left. The guardhouse was buzzing when James returned. Guards clustered in small groups, their voices dropping when he entered. Everyone knew. News traveled faster than light in the palace. Marcus Webb, James's closest friend among the guards, pulled him aside. Is it true? Marcus asked. You walked Carole Middleton through the Sovereign's entrance. Yes. Jesus, James. What were you thinking? I was thinking she needed help. Marcus shook his head. You're being transferred, aren't you? Balmoral. 6 months minimum, because you helped someone's mother reach her daughter. Marcus's voice held both disbelief and admiration. You're either the bravest person I know, or the stupidest. Maybe both, James said. He gathered his things from his locker. 17 years of service reduced to a box of personal items, photos, letters, commendations he'd been proud of once. As he packed, his phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Lauren. Heard you're being transferred. What about Emma? Emma, his daughter. She lived with Lauren during the week, but James had her every weekend. Every weekend for 8 years. Movie nights, park visits, bedtime stories. How was he supposed to explain that Daddy was moving to Scotland? He texted back, "Can we talk tonight?" The response came quickly, "She'll be devastated." James closed his eyes. This was the real cost. Not his career, not his reputation. The look on his daughter's face when he told her he was leaving. He finished packing and headed for the exit. As he passed the main corridor, he saw her, Carole Middleton. She was leaving through the main entrance this time, flanked by 2 different guards. Her face looked lighter now, the tension gone. Whatever had brought her here, whatever had been hurting her daughter, seemed resolved. Their eyes met for just a second. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Then she was gone. James stood alone in the corridor. Rain still hammered against the windows. The castle felt colder now, emptier. He thought about his daughter's face, about the 6 months they'd lose together, about weekends spent traveling 8 hours each way just to see her for a day. Was it worth it? He thought about Carole's desperate expression, about the sound of mother and daughter reuniting behind that door, about the simple human need to comfort someone you love. Yes, he decided. It was worth it, even if it cost him everything. James walked out into the rain, carrying his box of belongings. Behind him, Windsor Castle stood ancient and unmoved. The sovereign's entrance remained closed, its doors locked once more. But somewhere inside those walls, a mother sat with her daughter. And that, James thought, was enough. The rain soaked through his uniform as he walked to his car. He didn't rush. 17 years of service ended not with ceremony or appreciation, but with a quiet exit in the rain. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Lauren. "Emma keeps asking why you have to go. What do I tell her?" James sat in his car, staring at the message. The rain blurred the windshield. Windsor Castle disappeared behind sheets of water. What could he tell her? That Daddy broke the rules? That he chose to help a stranger instead of protecting his own future? He typed slowly. "Tell her Daddy did something he believed was right. Even though it was hard," started the engine. The windshield wipers cleared the glass, revealing the castle one more time. Lights glowed in the high windows. Behind one of those windows, Queen Camilla had stood watching him make his choice. She'd protected him from losing his job entirely. But she couldn't protect him from the consequences. No one could. James drove through the gates of Windsor Castle for what might be the last time in a year. The security guards waved him through without meeting his eyes. Everyone knew. Everyone was already forgetting. By tomorrow, there would be a new guard standing where he'd stood. Someone who would follow the rules without question. Someone who wouldn't make exceptions, no matter how desperate the request. Someone who would never open the sovereigns. Entrance for anyone but the king and queen. As Windsor Castle disappeared in his rearview mirror, James wondered if he'd made the right choice. His phone buzzed one more time. A number he didn't recognize. He pulled over to read it. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Catherine. My mother told me what you did today. I wanted you to know that your kindness meant more than you could possibly understand. Some gestures, though they break protocol, restore faith in humanity. Thank you for seeing us as people first. With deepest gratitude, C." James read it 3 times. Then he put his phone down and started driving again. Toward home. Toward his daughter. Toward whatever came next. The rain continued to fall. But somehow, James Mitchell smiled. 3 weeks passed. James Mitchell packed his life into boxes, preparing for Scotland. His small flat in London slowly emptied. Photos came down from walls. Books disappeared from shelves. 17 years of memories reduced to cardboard and tape. Emma helped, though she didn't understand why. "Scotland is really far, isn't it?" she asked, wrapping dishes in newspaper. "Pretty far, yeah? Will you still call me every night?" James knelt down to her level. "Every single night. I promise." She nodded, but her eyes were wet. 8 years old, and already learning that promises didn't stop people from leaving, Lauren stood in the doorway, watching. They'd divorced 3 years ago, but she'd never looked at him with anger. Just sadness that they couldn't make it work. "She's not sleeping well," Lauren said quietly when Emma went to her room. "She keeps asking if she did something wrong. If that's why you're leaving..." James felt his chest tighten. "Can I talk to her?" "You should." He found Emma sitting on her bed, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. The one he'd won for her at a carnival when she was 4. He said, sitting beside her. "You know, this isn't because of you, right? Then why are you going? How did you explain duty and consequence to an 8-year-old? How did you make her understand that sometimes doing the right thing came with a cost?" "I helped someone at work," James said carefully. "Someone who really needed help. But I broke some rules to do it, and now I have to go somewhere else for a while as a consequence." "That's stupid," Emma said. "You should get a reward for helping people, not a punishment." James smiled despite the ache in his chest. "You're right. It is stupid. Then why are you going?" "Because even when rules are stupid, sometimes we have to accept the consequences of breaking them. That's part of being a grown-up." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Then, was the person you helped okay?" "Yes, she got to see her daughter. She really needed to see her daughter. It's like how I need to see you." The words hit James like a physical blow. "Yeah, exactly like that." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood. How many more of these moments would he miss? 6 months, he said. "Then I'll be back. And we'll have every weekend again. Promise." "Promise." But as he held his daughter, James wondered if he'd made the right choice. Helping Carole Middleton had felt right in that moment, but was it worth missing 6 months of Emma's life? He didn't have an answer. The story leaked 3 days before James was scheduled to leave for Scotland. Someone talked. Maybe one of the servants who'd seen them in the corridor. Maybe a guard who couldn't keep a secret. Maybe someone in the security office. It didn't matter who. What mattered was that suddenly, the story was everywhere. Guard breaks 300-year protocol for Kate's mom. Windsor guard dismissed after royal entrance scandal. The door that caused a royal controversy, James's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, old friends, people he hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted the story. He didn't answer, but the coverage continued. Some outlets praised him as a hero. Others called him reckless and irresponsible. Social media exploded with opinions from people who'd never met him and never would. "He's a disgrace to the uniform," he showed true. "Humanity rules exist for a reason. Sometimes compassion matters more than protocol." James stayed off social media. He didn't read the articles. He focused on packing, on spending time with Emma, on preparing for Scotland. But the attention found him anyway. A woman showed up at his flat. Mid-40s, professional suit, kind eyes. "Mr. Mitchell." "I'm Sarah Brennan." "I'm a journalist with Not Interested," James said, starting to close the door. "Please, just 5 minutes. I want to tell your side of the story. There's no side to tell. I broke protocol. I'm being transferred." "That's it. Is it, though?" Sarah pulled out a notepad. "Because from what I've heard, you made a choice to help a mother reach her daughter. That's not a scandal. That's a human being doing something decent." James hesitated. Part of him wanted to slam the door. But another part, the part that was tired of being talked about without being heard, wanted to speak. "What do you want to know?" he asked. They sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Sarah's recorder sat between them, red light blinking. "Why did you do it?" she asked. She needed help. "But you knew you'd face consequences." "Yes, so why risk everything?" James thought about how to explain. "Have you ever watched someone you care about in pain, and you have the ability to help, but you're not supposed to?" Sarah nodded slowly. "That's what it felt like," James continued. "I looked at Mrs. Middleton, and I saw someone's mother. Not royalty. Not protocol. Just a woman who needed to reach her child. And I couldn't pretend I didn't see that. Do you regret it?" James glanced at a photo on the wall. Emma, age 5, sitting on his shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing. "I'm missing 6 months of my daughter's life," he said. "I'm leaving a job I loved. I'm being treated like I committed some terrible crime when all I did was open a door. So yes, you regret it?" "No," James said firmly. "I don't. Because if I had turned Mrs. Middleton away, I'd have to live with that. I'd have to look at myself in the mirror knowing I chose protocol over compassion, and I couldn't do that." Sarah made notes, nodding. "What about Queen Camilla?" "She intervened on your behalf. She showed me mercy. More than I deserved, probably. Why do you think she did that?" James remembered Camilla in the corridor, the understanding in her eyes, the way she'd said humanity was more important than tradition. I think James said carefully, she understood that sometimes being human is more important than being right. The interview lasted an hour. When Sarah left, James felt lighter somehow, like he'd finally said what he needed to say. The article came out 2 days later. The guard who chose compassion. Inside the Windsor controversy that's dividing Britain, it was fair, balanced, and honest. Sarah had captured his words exactly. She'd spoken to other guards, 2 palace insiders, 2 people who understood both sides. The response was overwhelming. Support flooded in. Letters arrived at his flat. Emails filled his inbox. Strangers on social media called him a hero, but not everyone agreed. Some still called him reckless. Some said he'd undermined the entire royal institution. James didn't read most of it. He was focused on one thing now, Emma. His last day in London arrived faster than he'd expected. He took Emma to the park, just the 2 of them. They fed ducks, played on the swings, got ice cream, even though it was November and freezing. "I'm going to miss you, Daddy," Emma said, chocolate ice cream on her chin. "I'm going to miss you too, Em. So much. Will you really call every night? Every single night? Even if you're busy?" "Even if I'm busy." She was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks. "Then, I'm proud of you." James looked at her, surprised. "Why?" "Because you helped someone. Even though it was hard? That's what heroes do. 8 years old and she understood what some adults couldn't. You're pretty smart, you know that," James said, pulling her close. "I get it from you." They sat on the park bench until the sun started to set. The sky turned orange and pink. November wind rustled through bare trees. James held his daughter and tried to memorize everything about this moment. The weight of her against his side. The sound of her voice. The way she still held his hand like she used to when she was little. Tomorrow, he'd drive to Scotland. Tomorrow, their weekends would end. Tomorrow, everything would change. But today, in this moment, they were together. And that had to be enough. As they walked home, Emma looked up at him. "Daddy." "Yeah. When you come back, can we go to the beach again? Like in the picture?" James thought of the photo on his wall. Of simpler times, when Emma was smaller and his life was more straightforward. "Absolutely," he said. "First weekend I'm back. Promise?" "Promise." They walked hand in hand through the London streets. The city James had called home for 17 years. The city he was leaving tomorrow. Above them, stars began to appear. The same stars that would shine over Scotland. The same stars Emma would see when she looked up at night. Distance, James realized, couldn't change some things. He'd be far away, but he'd still be her father. And she'd still be his whole world. That night, after Emma was asleep, James sat in his empty flat. Boxes stacked against the walls. Furniture waiting for movers. His entire life reduced to cargo. His phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Carole. I've been following the news. I'm so deeply sorry for the trouble this has caused you. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. What you did for me and my daughter is something I'll never forget. Thank you for your sacrifice." Then he typed a response. "Mrs. Middleton, please don't apologize. I made the choice freely. I'd make it again. I hope you and the princess are well. Take care." He pressed send, then set his phone down. The flat was silent, empty. The life he'd built here was ending. But somehow, James didn't feel regret. he felt something else. Peace. He'd made the right choice, even if it cost him everything. Some rules were less important than love, and that truth was worth more than any career. Balmoral. Castles sat in the Scottish Highlands like something from another century. Stone walls, endless grounds, mountains rising in the distance. Beautiful and isolated in equal measure, James arrived on a grey morning. The drive from London had taken 9 hours. 9 hours of leaving everything he knew behind. The head of Balmoral security met him at the gate. Robert MacLeod, a Scotsman in his 60s, with silver hair and a stern face. "Mitchell," he said without warmth, "follow me." The castle felt different from Windsor. Smaller, quieter, less like a working palace, and more like a museum. Most of the royal family only visited during summer. In November, it was nearly empty. "You'll be on perimeter duty," MacLeod said, showing him to the guardhouse. 6-hour shifts. 4 days on, 1 day off. No contact with any family members if they visit. No exceptions. "Understood, sir." "I read about what happened at Windsor." MacLeod's eyes were hard. "I don't care about the circumstances. I don't care about your reasons. Here, you follow protocol. Always. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good. You start tonight. 8 to 2 in the morning." James unpacked in his assigned room. Small, basic, functional. A bed, a desk, a narrow window looking out at mountains. He thought of his flat in London, of Emma's room down the hall, of the sound of her footsteps in the morning. This place had none of that. That night he walked the perimeter in darkness. The Scottish wind cut through his uniform. His radio crackled with check-ins from other guards. The castle loomed above him, windows dark. At midnight, his phone rang. "Emma, Daddy. Are you there yet?" "I'm here, Em. What's it like?" James looked up at the castle, at the mountains beyond, at the vast emptiness surrounding him. "It's different," he said. "Quieter than Windsor? Are there other guards?" "A few, not as many." "Are they nice?" James thought of MacLeod's cold welcome, of the other guards who'd barely acknowledged him. "They're professional," he said. Emma was quiet. He could hear the television in the background, Lauren's voice saying something he couldn't make out. "I miss you," Emma said softly. "I miss you too, sweetheart. So much. Mom says I can visit at Christmas. If you're allowed visitors." Christmas. 6 weeks away. It felt like an eternity. "I'd love that," James said. "We'll build a snowman. There's tons of snow up here. Promise. Promise." They talked for another 10 minutes. About school, about her friends, about nothing and everything. When they hung up, James stood alone in the darkness. Watching his breath form clouds in the cold air, 6 months suddenly felt impossible. The days blurred together. Patrol, sleep, eat, patrol. The other guards kept their distance. Word had spread about Windsor. Some seemed to respect what he'd done. Others thought he was a liability. No one became his friend. 2 weeks in, James was stationed at the main gate when a convoy of cars approached. Security scrambled. Radios crackled with updates. Royal arrival. Princess Anne. For vehicles. ETA 2 minutes. James stood at attention as the cars passed through. He caught a glimpse of Princess Anne in the second vehicle, the king's sister. Known for her known-sense approach and dedication to duty, she looked directly at him as the car passed. Just for a second. Then she was gone. MacLeod approached after the convoy disappeared inside the castle grounds. "You're being summoned," he said. "It's sir. Princess Anne wants to see you." "Don't ask me why." James's heart raced as he followed MacLeod inside. They walked through corridors he hadn't seen yet, grander than his usual routes, filled with paintings and history. They stopped outside a sitting room. MacLeod knocked once. "Come in," a voice called. Princess Anne sat near a window, a cup of tea beside her. She wore a simple sweater and slacks, nothing formal, but her presence filled the room anyway. "Mr. Mitchell," she said. "Sit down." James sat, unsure what to expect. MacLeod left, closing the door behind him. Princess Anne studied him for a moment. I read about what happened at Windsor, Your Royal Highness. Let me finish. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. You broke protocol. You used an entrance reserved for sovereigns. You disregarded 300 years of tradition. Yes, ma'am? And you did it to help Carole Middleton reach her daughter. Yes, ma'am. But Anne took a sip of tea. Outside the window, mountains stretched endlessly. Do you know why we have these protocols? She asked. To maintain order? To preserve tradition? Yes. But also, she set her cup down. Also because this family, this institution, can be overwhelming. The protocols create distance. They protect us from being seen as just people. James wasn't sure what to say. But we are people, Anne continued. My niece Catherine is a princess, yes. But she's also a mother, a daughter, a woman who sometimes needs support that no amount of protocol can provide. She looked at him directly. What you did was wrong by the letter of the law, but it was right in every other way that matters. You saw someone in pain and you helped them. That's not something to be ashamed of, Your Royal Highness. I appreciate I'm not finished.
Else.
Anne's eyes were intense. You're here as punishment. But I want you to understand something. The people who make this family work, the guards, the staff, the people behind the scenes, they're just as important as we are. Maybe more so. She stood, walking to the window. My mother, Queen Elizabeth, understood that. She knew the palace didn't run on protocol alone. It ran on people who cared. People who saw us as human beings first. I tried to see everyone that way, James said quietly. I know. That's why I wanted to meet you. Anne turned back to him. Your transfer here was meant to be a punishment, but I'm going to ask Robert to make it something else. A learning opportunity? A chance to see a different side of this world. I don't understand. Balmoral is where we come to be ourselves. No cameras. Just family. While you're here, you'll see something most guards never do. You'll see that we're not so different from you. James felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe? How long will I need to stay? That depends. Originally 6 months. But if you prove yourself here, if you show that you understand both protocol and humanity, Anne smiled slightly, I might be able to arrange an early return. Say 3 months instead of 6. 3 months. Half the time, 3 more months away from Emma instead of 6. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Don't thank me yet. MacLeod is tough. This place is isolated, and you'll still be held to the highest standards. But you'll be treated fairly. That's more than Windsor was offering. Anne walked to the door, opening it. One more thing, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, ma'am? My sister-in-law Camilla told me what happened in that corridor. How you turned off your radio. How you chose to help, despite knowing the cost. Her expression softened. That takes courage. Real courage. Don't lose that, even if it gets you in trouble sometimes. I'll try not to, ma'am. Good. Now get back to work. James left the sitting room feeling lighter than he had in weeks. MacLeod was waiting in the corridor, his expression unreadable. Well, MacLeod asked. She was kind. Princess Anne is always fair. She sees people clearly. MacLeod started walking, and James followed. She asked me to work with you. Make sure you understand what you're really protecting here. And what's that, sir? MacLeod stopped, turning to face him. For the first time, his stern expression softened slightly. Not just a building. Not just tradition, people, human beings who carry the weight of a nation on their shoulders. Who give up privacy, freedom, normal lives. They deserve protection, but they also deserve compassion. He started walking again. Maybe you understand that better than most of us. The weeks that followed were different. MacLeod remained strict, but fair. He showed James parts of Balmoral most guards never saw. The private gardens where the family walked. The sitting rooms where they gathered without ceremony. This is where they come to be normal, MacLeod explained one day. Or as normal as they can be. James began to see the castle differently. Not as a monument to protocol, but as a refuge. A place where people burdened by duty could briefly set it down. He called Emma every night, as promised. The conversations became the highlight of his day. "Only 10 more weeks, Daddy," she said one night. "Then you're home. 10 weeks. Princess Anne had kept her word. His transfer had been reduced to 3 months total. "Then we go to the beach," James reminded her. "You always remember, how could I forget?" December arrived. Snow covered the highlands. Balmoral transformed into something from a fairy tale, white and pristine and beautiful. And then, one morning, MacLeod found him during his shift. "Mitchell, you have a visitor, sir?" "Your daughter. Your ex-wife brought her up for the day." There in the staff common room. Ow. James's heart leaped. "Emma's here? Go. You have 2 hours." James ran. Through corridors, downstairs, across the grounds. He burst into the common room, and there she was. Emma. She saw him and ran. He caught her, lifting her into the air, holding her like he'd never let go. "You came," he said, his voice breaking. "Mom surprised me. We drove all night." Lauren stood nearby, smiling despite the exhaustion on her face. "She's been talking about this for 3 days straight." "Thank you," James said. "Thank you for doing this. She needed to see you." "We both did." The 2 hours passed too quickly. They talked, played cards, drank hot chocolate. Emma told him about school, about her friends, about everything he'd missed. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged him tight. "Only 8 more weeks," she whispered. 8 more weeks. Then I'm home, promise. Promise. He watched them drive away, Emma waving from the back window until the car disappeared. MacLeod appeared beside him. "You've got a good kid. The best. Which is why you did it, isn't she?" Helped Mrs. Middleton. James looked at him, confused. "You understood what it's like," MacLeod continued. "To need your child. To have that moment be more important than anything else?" James said quietly. "I understood." MacLeod nodded. "That's what makes you a good guard. And a good man." Walked away, leaving James alone in the snow. 8 more weeks, James thought. Then he'd go home. Then everything would begin again. But this time, he'd carry something with him. Understanding, compassion, the knowledge that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. And that some things like love, like family, like basic human decency, were worth any cost. 8 weeks passed faster than James expected. January arrived with fierce highland storms. The castle battened down, guards working double shifts to ensure security in the brutal weather. James barely slept for 3 days straight, but he didn't complain. Every hour that passed brought him closer to home. On his last day at Balmoral, MacLeod called him into his office.
Mitchell.
James sat, wondering if something had gone wrong. If his return to Windsor was being delayed. "I spoke with Daniel Foster at Windsor this morning," MacLeod said. "Your position there is waiting for you. Same post, same duties." Princess Anne made sure of it. Relief flooded through James. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. You earned it." MacLeod pulled out a file. "I've been instructed to give you this." Inside was a letter. "Official Palace Stationery." James recognized the signature at the bottom immediately. "Queen Camilla," he read. "Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to write to you personally before your return to Windsor. What happened in November tested the boundaries between duty and humanity. You chose humanity, and while that choice came with consequences, it also revealed something important about the kind of person we need protecting this family. We don't need guards who blindly follow orders. We need people who understand that behind every title, every protocol, every rule, there's a human being. You understood that. Princess Anne has spoken highly of your time at Balmoral. She tells me you've learned to balance protocol with compassion, a rare skill. Welcome back to Windsor. I trust we'll do better by you this time." With appreciation, Camilla R. James read it twice, hardly believing the words. "She doesn't write many personal letters," MacLeod said. "Consider yourself fortunate." "I do, sir. One more thing." MacLeod stood, extending his hand. "It's been an honor working with you. You reminded an old soldier that rules serve people, not the other way around." They shook hands. James felt emotion rising in his throat. "Thank you for giving me a chance," James said. "Gave yourself the chance. I just watched." The drive back to London felt different from the drive north. Same roads, same scenery. But James himself had changed. He arrived at his flat late at night. The furniture was still there. Lauren had kept an eye on the place while he was gone. But it felt empty, unfamiliar. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat by the window, watching London wake up. The city he'd left 3 months ago. The city that was home at 7 in the morning. His phone rang. Emma's voice full of excitement. "Are you home? Are you really home?" "I'm really home, Mem. Can I come over, please?" "Mom says I have school," but James heard Lauren's voice in the background, laughing. Then she took the phone. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Lauren said. "She woke up at 5 asking if it was time to see you yet." "I'll be here." Those 20 minutes felt longer than 3 months. James paced, straightened things that didn't need straightening. Looked out the window a dozen times. Finally, he heard footsteps in the hall. A knock at the door. He opened it. Emma launched herself at him. He caught her, holding on tight, feeling her arms around his neck and her face pressed against his shoulder. "You came back," she said. "You really came back. I promised, didn't I?" Lauren stood in the doorway, tears in her eyes. "Welcome home, James." They spent the morning together. Emma showed him everything he'd missed: drawings from school, certificate for good behavior, a loose tooth that would fall out any day now. "And you know what the best part is?" Emma said. "What?" "Now we can go to the beach, like you promised." James smiled. "This weekend. Pack your warmest coat." Windsor Castle looked exactly the same when James returned to work Monday morning. Same stone walls. Same ancient corridors. Same guards standing at attention, but the way people looked at him had changed. Some guards nodded in respect. Others avoided his eyes. Marcus Webb pulled him aside within the first hour. "The legend returns," Marcus said, grinning. "How was Scotland?" "Cold. Quiet. Educational. I heard Princess Anne specifically requested your early return. Word travels fast. Word travels fast when you become the guard who made the royal family reconsider 300 years of protocol." Marcus lowered his voice. "You're kind of famous now. In a good way with some people. In a complicated way with others. I just want to do my job, Marcus." "Then you're going to love this. You've been reassigned." James's stomach dropped. "What? Where?" "Not transferred. Reassigned. You're now on detail for state events. Closer to the family. Better hours. It's actually a promotion." "How is that possible?" "I broke protocol." "Yeah, but apparently you also reminded everyone that protocols serve people, not the other way around." "Some people upstairs appreciated that." Marcus clapped his shoulder. "Plus, Queen Camilla specifically requested you. So unless you want to argue with the Queen..." James shook his head, overwhelmed. "This doesn't make sense." "Makes perfect sense. You saw people as people. That's exactly what they need." The first state event was a reception for foreign dignitaries. James stood in the grand ballroom, watching the room fill with ambassadors, politicians, and royalty from a dozen nations. And then he saw them. The Prince and Princess of Wales, William in formal military dress, Catherine in a stunning blue gown. They moved through the room with practiced grace, greeting guests, smiling for cameras. Catherine's eyes found James across the ballroom. For just a moment, she smiled. A real smile, not the one she used for photographs. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." James nodded once. Later, as the event wound down, he was summoned to a private corridor. Catherine stood there alone, her formal composure dropped. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, "I've been hoping to see you, Your Royal Highness. Please, after what you did for my mother and me, you can call me Catherine." She smiled softly. "I wanted to tell you personally how grateful we are. That day was difficult. My mother arriving when she did, being able to be just my mom for a moment, instead of Carole Middleton, mother of the Princess of Wales. It meant everything. I'm glad I could help, ma'am." "You did more than help." You reminded us that beneath all of this, she gestured to her gown, the castle around them, we're still just a family. We still need each other in the simple ways that everyone does. She reached into her clutch and pulled out an envelope. This is from my mother and me. A personal thank you. Don't open it now. James took the envelope, feeling its weight. You didn't have to. We wanted to. You sacrificed a great deal. We wanted to acknowledge that. Honestly, ma'am, seeing you and your mother reunited was thanks enough. Catherine's eyes glistened slightly. My mother still talks about you. About the guard who chose kindness over his career. She says it restored her faith in people. I just opened a door. You did much more than that. Catherine composed herself, the formal mask settling back into place. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for everything. She walked away, back into the ballroom, back into her role. James looked down at the envelope. He slipped it into his pocket, unopened. That weekend, James kept his promise. The beach was freezing in January. Wind whipped across the sand. Waves crashed gray and endless. Sensible people stayed home, but James and Emma came anyway. They built a lopsided snowman using wet sand and found shells. Emma shrieked when waves came too close. They ate fish and chips from a paper wrapper, huddled against the wind. This is better than I remembered, Emma said, her nose red from cold. Yeah, because you're here. You came back, just like you promised. James pulled her close. I'll always come back, always, even if you have to break rules. He thought about that November day, about Carole Middleton's desperate face, about opening the Sovereign's entrance, about choosing compassion over protocol, especially then, he said. They stayed until sunset. The sky turned pink and orange. The beach emptied until they were the only ones left. Walking back to the car, Emma said, Daddy, are you happy? Why do you ask? Because you seem different. Sad, but also, I don't know. Like you understand something you didn't before? James smiled. 8 years old and she saw him more clearly than most adults. I am happy, he said. I learned something important while I was away. What? That doing the right thing isn't always easy. Sometimes it costs you things you love, but it's still worth it. Emma thought about this. Like how you helped that lady even though you had to leave me. Exactly like that. I would have done the same thing, Emma said firmly. If someone needed help, I'd help them, even if it was hard. James felt his heart swell with pride. You're going to be an amazing person. I learned from the best. Back at his flat that night, after Emma had gone home, James finally opened the envelope Catherine had given him. Inside was a handwritten letter and a photograph. The letter was from Carole Middleton. Mr. Mitchell, words seem inadequate to express what your kindness meant to us. You didn't just open a door, you reminded us that compassion exists even in places it's governed by rigid rules. The photograph is from that day. It was taken by security cameras in the corridor. Catherine requested a copy. She wanted you to see the moment you gave us. In the picture, you can see me walking toward my daughter's room. You can't see it in the image, but moments after this was taken, I held my daughter while she cried. I stroked her hair like I did when she was little. I told her everything would be okay. Because of you, I was there when she needed me most. That's a gift I can never repay. You paid a high price for your kindness. Please know it wasn't wasted. With deepest gratitude and respect, Carole Middleton James looked at the photograph. Black and white, slightly grainy. The corridor at Windsor, Carole walking toward a door. Him in the background, standing at attention. A simple moment. A mother going to her child. But he knew what it had cost. What it had meant. He placed the letter and photograph on his desk, next to the picture of Emma at the beach. 2 images. 2 reminders of what mattered. Love, family, compassion. The things worth breaking rules for. Outside his window, London hummed with life. Windsor Castle stood in the distance, lit against the night sky. Inside those walls, protocols continued. Rules were followed. Order was maintained. But now, at least one guard understood something important. Rules served people, not the other way around. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was choose humanity over duty. James Mitchell had made that choice. It had cost him 3 months with his daughter. It had tested his career. It had forced him to question everything he'd believed about service and sacrifice. But he'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because when Carole Middleton had stood in the rain, asking for help reaching her daughter, James had seen something simple and true, a mother's love. And no protocol in the world was more important than that. He turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow, he'd return to Windsor. He'd stand at attention, follow orders, maintain the protocols that kept the royal household running. But he'd also remember. He'd remember that behind every title was a person. Behind every rule was a reason. And sometimes, the most important thing you could do was simply open a door for someone who needed to go home. James closed his eyes, thinking of Emma's smile, of Carole's grateful tears, of Catherine's quiet thank you. Some moments changed everything. That rainy November morning had changed him, and he wouldn't trade it for anything, not even for the 3 months he'd lost, because he'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that he'd done the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost him, even when the whole world was watching. He'd chosen love over protocol, humanity over duty, compassion over career. And in the end, that's what made him not just a good guard, but a good man. Outside, London slept. Inside Windsor Castle, protocols continued. And somewhere between duty and humanity, James Mitchell had found his place. A place where rules mattered, but people mattered more. And that, he realized, was exactly where he was meant to be.